Мир стоит на грани.
The world is on the brink of a new Cold War. Some are even saying that it has already begun.
Вместо того, чтобы
Instead of becoming a leader of change in a global world, Europe has turned into an arena of political upheaval, of competition for spheres of influence, and finally of military conflict.
To most Americans, the phrase Cold War is a relic of a time that could never happen again because we are a much more sophisticated and integrated world. No way would America and Russia ever again point nukes at each other and dare the other side to fire first. To those people, let's drop the dime of reality. Let's welcome to MidPoint. He is the Director of Russian Studies at the American Enterprise Institute. Dr. Leon Aron joins us today. Dr. Aron, thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure.
I bring up the phrase Cold War, and many of us still remember that time, even though we were just kids, where there were missiles pointed at each other, and it was just that, mutually assured destruction. Is Gorbachev indicating, well, wait a minute, let's even go beyond him for a moment. Do you think we could ever get to that point again, with Vladimir Putin leading Russia, where we would again have hundreds of missiles pointed at each other and that dare, that look in the eye to go ahead and be the first to shoot?
Well, unfortunately, if you asked me half a year ago, not to mention a year ago, I would have said definitely not. But now, especially reading Putin's speech today, his annual address to the nation, it's possible. He believes, or at least he projects the belief, that the US and Europe, the collective West, are trying to undermine Russia. In fact, he compared the West to Hitler in World War II in attacking Russia. And he believes that we are plotting to destroy Russia, destroy its sovereignty, destroy its liberty. And he says it. This is the president of Russia, not off the record, not in an interview, in the address to the nation. If you continue along that route, Putin will have to up the ante all the time, especially because the domestic economic situation is bad, to whip up patriotism, to whip up, people's putting up with the inflation, with the growth of prices. So who knows where he's going to stop? And this is the most important thing that really bothers me. We've never faced kind of a personalistic dictatorship, which by definition is very unpredictable, with that dictatorship having 1,700 nuclear weapons.
But let's look at this now. Here's his statement that he made regarding Russia and what he wants. Quote, "No one will succeed in achieving military superiority over Russia. Our army is modern, combat ready, polite, as people say now, but threatening. We have enough forces, will, and courage to defend our freedom." Wonderful words, great rhetoric, but I'm going to play the other side of this coin for a moment. Is this just Vladimir Putin being the bare-chested blowhard that he is, just throwing it out there, making sure that he is continued to be lauded by his own people, and there's really not a lot behind it?
I'm afraid not. I'm afraid that would be too optimistic a spin. Remember, Putin stepped on a kind of an escalator of a presidency for life, with or without elections, who cares? It's the same escalator that Saddam Hussein was on, or Hosni Mubarak, or Muammar Gaddafi. He and Russia, in his mind at least, are the same. Russia without him, as his deputy chief of staff recently said, without Putin, there is no Russia. So Putin is Russia. And that quote, actually, which I also saw in his speech, I watched it real time, that's not the most troubling quote. The most troubling quote is what I alluded to before, that the West is continuing to try to undermine, enslave, destroy Russia. And Ukraine, which Putin claims was just a plot, was just a step on that road. How do you get off this logic? And in fact, a lot of Russian independent analysts were very disappointed by this speech, because they thought that given the economic situation, Putin will indicate something. He'll throw an olive branch. He'll say, well, okay, we had differences, but we need to sit down and resolve them. No, he is saying the West is out to destroy Russia, and he will do everything to protect it.
But here's the thing that we've always learned. We've learned that the Russian people like a little capitalism in their soup anymore, that they're a little bit used to what's happened now. It's not quite the Soviet Union. So the thinking process here is, are these citizens then happily and willfully just going to fall in line behind Putin and say, you want a nuclear war? Right behind you, Mr. President. It doesn't match with what we've heard about the citizenry.
Right. Well, I don't think Putin wants a nuclear war, but I think he wants to stay president for life. And that means that either you buy people's allegiance and loyalty, as he did in the first years, 2000, 2008, by hitching the economy to the prices of oil and letting it trickle down, and everybody's happy and people loved him because he brought stability and prosperity, or in the absence of it, and clearly this is not going to happen anymore, you whip up a situation where you pretend or you make believe that Russia is surrounded by enemies, that without me, there's nobody to protect you, and yes, you're suffering, but you're suffering from Mother Russia.
Professor,
now,
are the people of Russia that gullible?
You should hear the propaganda. You should hear the 24-hour propaganda in which no alternate point of view is presented on the national television where 95% of the Russians take their news. That's why you have the opinion polls that show A, Putin is 85% popular, and B, about the same amount of people believe that, yes, Ukraine was a plot to destroy Russia.
Let's get back to Gorbachev here, a couple of minutes that we have left here. He said that America is tortured by triumphalism. What do you think he meant by that?
Well, by the way, take it with a grain of salt. I mean, I think I have a greatest respect for Mikhail Gorbachev, probably one of the greatest liberators of the world, since Christ or Mandela or Gandhi. But A, he wants to stay relevant. B, he wants to remind everybody that this is the 25th anniversary of the Malta Agreement between him and Bush Sr., which at that time was very important, was the end of the Cold War, but nobody barely remembers it. And if you notice, the key to his statement is that, well, elder statesmen have to get together and help resolve it. I think he partly is also concerned for his newspaper, which is the only national opposition newspaper called Novaya Gazeta, which I think somebody in the Kremlin may have hinted to him, listen, you better voice some support for us, or God knows what's going to happen to the tax returns of your newspaper and the tax authorities. Who knows? I don't know. But this is a statement that is very mild in its critique of the West. It's almost as if Gorbachev made a step necessary to mollify somebody in the Kremlin, but not go all the way. His criticism, he basically criticizes both sides. And triumphalism, well,
he has to play both sides just like any good politician is the way it always goes.
That's exactly right.
We are all out of time at this moment. Professor, I want to thank you so much for being here today. We will talk again. A happy holiday to you and your family.
To you too. Thank you very much.
Next up, the cop perspective on what happened in Staten Island. It's coming up next on MidPoint.